Welcome, Harry, to today's podcast, Outside the Lines. So, this podcast is around people living life on their own terms, going a little bit beyond like what they thought would be possible or what everyone around them is doing, figuring things out for themselves and like really creating life on their own terms. And I'm actually really happy to have you here as a guest because I think that you're a great example of that and you've been doing a lot of cool stuff. I know you've had some realizations also along the way, and I'd love for you to share some of them today. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Very excited to be here. Excited for the podcast and to just have a chat and share some of the experiences over the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. And so maybe before we dive into it, I quickly want to introduce to our audience also how we know each other. So we met at the beginning of 2020 in January when we were both working for Cargo One, which is a startup in Berlin. We were both entrepreneur in residence at the time, and we were working mostly in sales. And so we had a lot of things in common, right? So we both worked in venture capital before. We both joined to see how to grow a startup, and we learned a lot in that process. And we were also we were working there at quite an interesting time. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, what we were doing and what was the context of all that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think you're right. I think we joined at a very interesting time in terms of the startup's growth curve, right? So I think when we joined, certainly when I joined, I think I was employee number 17 or something like that. Yeah, I think maybe you were slightly before, maybe 15 or 16.
I think I
And
was 18, so you
you
might
were
have
what?
been
Sorry.
20 or something. Yeah, I think I was 18.
Okay. Yeah, we're quite early on anyway. So obviously they built MVP, they'd built the product, and we joined just at the start of that sort of growth curve, right? So super interesting time to join, and still to this day I maintain it as like one of my very much like defining experiences and probably one of my most important work experiences in terms of learning about startups, learning about product, learning about how to build a sales funnel as we learned that together for sure. Um, but I think it was a very interesting time because we came in just as the product had sort of built a bit of a base. They had a bit of an understanding of, they'd tested it in beta, and they had some users on board, and then we came in at this time when the sales team was me, you, and another intern, right? So we came in at this quite exciting time where we were able to work alongside an experienced sales rep who'd worked with a number of different portfolio companies to help build out that process. And I think that was invaluable, stuff like learning about sales funnel, building the sequences, so the email sequence and call sequences that we're going to go through, the integrations with our CRM, which at the time I think was HubSpot. So it was a very interesting time. And then, like you said, getting ourselves stuck in with some actual sales, which I think is an incredibly valuable skill to be able to use, even though at points, especially early on, when we were in the phone booth, we were like, what are we doing? What is this?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very interesting time, and one where we had a lot of autonomy as well, which I think was very important for people like us who, we were young, hungry, and quite, keen to be thrown into the deep end. And that's exactly what we
Yeah.
were.
No, for sure. And I think that, I would 100% agree that it was like one of my most defining and valuable work experiences, 100%. And we were also surrounded with like such smart and driven people. So I feel like whatever you were doing in the company, you were just also learning so much from the people around you. And I think what's important to say though also is that obviously this is a company that, we are talking now about like which number employee were you, because now they're way over 100 and they're like, I don't even know how many they have now, but it's like, I think the 100 is like a few years ago already, and they're like across multiple continents, and it's like, a global company at this point. And we were actually there at a point when we were leading up to the Series A, and
Yeah.
that turned out to be very successful Series A, followed by a very successful Series B, and they managed to attract like world-class investors. So that also didn't come out of nowhere, and I think we were really there at a point when it was all about growth. And
Yeah.
so I want to mention that because we'll talk a little bit about growth also later. Um, because I mean, what we were essentially doing, you mentioned the phone booths, was like for a couple of weeks straight, like day in, day out, we would sit in these phone booths, right? So this was pre COVID. We were actually also there when we did the whole shift, right? Like I remember you joined, and then like a month or two later, we all went into remote and we never came back from that. But the first weeks that we were working together in person, like we would fight over the phone booth with the window because if you got the other one, you were literally all day surrounded by black foam in January, right? And then I remember when I would go like outside for lunch and it was like Berlin in January, it would be gray. And you called me like a sunflower because I was like trying to catch some sun and just like try to get some light for the day, which there wasn't a lot. So I do think that, you know, we also learned like what are the sacrifices and what are the things that you need to put in to be able to scale, right? And to really put in all your efforts for like this hyper growth. And we saw it in the numbers, like definitely worked, but we were very much focused on like, we're going to make this like a huge thing, right?
Growth and iteration was what it was all about at that point. And yeah, I think doing sales, especially so early on when you're kind of, I think about how many times it was our process was iterated, with the sales process, the sequences that we're doing, our calls themselves, right? Because at first we were kind of just going off the bat. But I think going about and learning things that way is so valuable because you learn, you try again, you learn, you try again. And I think that was something that Cargo One, very much pushed, wasn't it? It was one of the leitmotifs was feedback is a gift. And that was, certainly for me when I arrived in Germany was quite a the level of feedback was quite a rude awakening for me coming from England where everyone's very fluffy in how they say things and dress things up. And when I came to Germany, it was quite a culture shock, but it was actually a very welcome culture shock
So
because having that level of feedback is really, really beneficial.
I mean, I do remember contributing to that. Like, I remember when I told you at some point early in the morning, like, I'm not going to do small talk with you first thing I arrive in the office. If
Yeah.
you want to ask me how I'm doing, ask me again at lunchtime.
Yeah, cup of tea and a bit of small talk about the weather in the morning is fairly typical British custom, but in Germany, not so much.
Not so much, no. And I think I've since worked also at a class at ISADE around cross-cultural management. And I think there's like so much there also. But I would say even for Germany, Cargo One like prides itself in the radical candor culture, right? So even for Germany, like you would be extremely honest and there would be like no bullshit whatsoever around like telling people if something didn't make sense, right? And so you did get like some tough love and some very direct feedback, but that helped you improve, right? And I think we definitely learned so much from it. However, just wanted to mention that to understand like what background we came from, right? And what like maybe the school that we went through also was. And as I mentioned, we also both worked in venture capital before that. So we definitely had that mindset of like, what does a company need in order to scale? And what does a company need in order to get really big? And like, how do you attract like big investors and all these kind of things? Now, you actually have been doing a couple of other things though since then, because I'm now talking to you as an entrepreneur, and you have been over the past 2 years, 2.5, building your own business, right? And you're also undergoing a transition around that right now. So I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I was at Cargo One for best part of 2 years, right? And then I felt I'd learned I find I kind of reached a bit of a learning plateau, I think, with Cargo One, and it made sense for me to move on. Following that, I moved to another company and was there only for a short period of time before I started setting up my own company. My own company was actually an events company. Like you might have seen on LinkedIn, it's a puppy yoga company, puppy therapy company, which is quite a niche field for sure. But it's something that I very much sort of stumbled upon. In that period where I'd started a new job, we were looking to go to a couple of these sessions actually, right? And we me and my girlfriend actually saw an opportunity where we were like, oh, okay, well, could we not create one of these events for ourselves, right? Because that'd be super cool, super fun. And we set one up, and it was a massive success. It was just with our friends and family, just as a, to be honest, just a bit of fun. And following that, we saw the opportunity, and we were like, okay, wow, this is actually quite an interesting. People were loving it. We had great feedback. There was a huge amount of benefit for the dogs that were involved, a huge amount of benefit for everyone else who was involved as well. And we thought, why not? Could we not do this on a regular basis? So following that, went through the process of starting to run sessions on a more consistent basis. Started to run sessions in different areas across London as well, and so it kind of fell into place in terms of going from working in a startup myself to then actually um, setting up a company of my own. And it's yeah, it was a slightly difficult and different transition, because in my mind I'd always been very much of the opinion, I'd always known that I was going to start a company. I'd started companies in uni, for example. Nothing had really taken off, unfortunately, but I always sort of knew that was the direction I was going to be headed. But it very much didn't look like a events business or anything, along those sort of lines. I always had it in my mind that I was going to be running a, VC backed company, one where I would get investment. I would create this crazy new product, and I would, build out this team, try and grow exponentially, and shoot for the stars. And it kind of that hasn't really worked like that. And I have found myself running this events business, which obviously is a very different type of business to a high growth SaaS company or something like that, right? So it's different in ways as from running a startup, but equally a lot of those learnings that I gained from working in Cargo One and other startups has actually helped me massively. Setting up leitmotifs, operational processes, sales processes, funnel, utilizing the CRM, managing people. So it's been quite interesting that despite two vastly different businesses, hugely different in their models, how they operate, what their long-term goals are. We're not striving for a huge exit. We're a cash flow business, right? Generating
Yeah.
generating cash flow. It's interesting how there is actually a lot of crossover still, and
No,
a lot of the learnings has helped me as well.
for sure. And I definitely want to go into that with you. Maybe just to clarify, first of all, because you mentioned puppy yoga, and I know that that has been a thing in London already. I know that I hadn't heard about it in Germany or now in Barcelona where I'm at. So maybe
Yeah.
just to explain, because I remember I talked to people about it and they were like, "Oh, is this like puppies doing yoga?" And it's like, no, it's not puppies doing yoga. So basically, what happens is that people come for a yoga class, and then there'll also be puppies there, and they can kind of cuddle the puppies, and at the same time, it's like, so for the humans, obviously, it has a lot of like mental health benefits, because not only do they do yoga, but they also get to cuddle puppies. But for the puppies, they come from breeders, and it's just because they get like given to families, and so they'll be accustomed to humans, right? And so they'll get this experience of already socializing, and there's like a lot of
Yeah.
benefits for both sides, right? Just to be clear, like what's actually happening there.
Yeah, so it's we run puppy yoga and puppy therapy events. So it's a combination of combining sort of movement with mindfulness. That's the that's the whole premise of what we do. So we work with corporate clients who want to run therapy sessions for their staff. We've worked with NHS, so it's, with healthcare people. We've worked with obviously the public as well. So people were able to come along. They get access to be around animals, spend time with animals, which of course, I think a lot of people are aware of the benefits that delivers, whilst also making sure that we socialize these pups as well, which is a very, very important part of their development. So, when they reach a certain age, they will be going to their forever home. So they'll be off out in the world and spending, walking around London or wherever. In that period beforehand, it's important that they get exposure to being around different people, being around different experiences, doing it in a sort of therapy session, which is obviously a very relaxed environment, not too many people, is the perfect place to do so.
Nice. Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying and explaining. And I think what's important here is like because how I know you, you've always been a person who cares a lot about health, mental health, well-being, right? So as you said, like you didn't see yourself running an events business, but I guess in terms of topic, like there is some connection to your overall mission and like things that you're interested in. However, you did mention that running an events business is obviously very different from what you had envisioned before. It's different from running a SaaS company. What were like the main things around starting a events business that maybe you didn't see coming or that are just different than running another company?
Yeah, so I mean, it's tricky, right? There's definitely some benefits to events businesses and companies like this. So firstly, to get off the ground, like your startup costs are relatively low. You don't need to build a product. You don't need to raise money to well, typically you wouldn't need to raise money to build an engineering team and build a product that you're gonna then sell. It's quite easy for you to get off the ground in terms of setting something up, starting things, running a few testers. You can do your own market research and figure out what is the best way to go, and then you can start getting that cash flow in and build it up from there. So from that point of view, it's quite good, and you're able to scale that, gradually as you go along. But yeah, definitely some of the things with running event businesses, some of the biggest challenges are it's you can scale, but it's very difficult to, and it's a very different thing to running a small scale couple of events a week is one thing, but trying to expand that and grow that to a level like you would with other conventional startups um, is very difficult, and also you want to do it in a different way, to be honest, because you have to ensure you're maintaining quality control. That is super super important. It's not like a tech product, right, where once you have the product built, scaling it is just expanding into different territories. You need to scale with different teams. You build your sales output, you build your marketing output. You obviously need to make sure that your customer support is scaled alongside that as well. But it's a lot simpler in terms of once you have the product, you can scale it. You can scale it infinitely, right? However, with events businesses, it's a lot more clunky. So for every event you put on, it's not a digital product where you can just sell it and it's just gone and you just put it everywhere. You need to have a whole team to run that event in different locations as you grow. So that's something that is very challenging, and yeah, and also very difficult to do in terms of scale. So yeah, as a business model, events is not ideal, to be honest, for scaling to a really high level. And also, like in terms of profit margins as well, it's SaaS companies, once you, like I said, once you have that product built, it's very profitable.
Yeah, because you always need
But
to have your classes sold out, right? Like every class that you
yeah,
have,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. It makes a huge difference if you're 80% sold out or 60% sold out. It makes a huge dent in your margins, right? If you're operating a 10-20% margin and your top line is, the difference between your top line being 80 or 90%, then filters down to your bottom line, which is either 10 or 20. So that's 10% difference at the top line can make a huge difference, double your bottom line, which again makes things very tricky, and also very difficult to predict, because where we don't run a nice, everyone loves a recurring revenue model, right? Build a SaaS product, recurring revenue, sell it for a 10x multiple. That's what everyone loves. Everyone wants to do. It's not the same for events, because yeah, developing that recurring revenue isn't really possible, because typically it's a one-off thing that people go to do, and it's very difficult in terms of predictability, to know where your costs are going to be, how much you're going to have coming in month to month, and it very much depends on the season as well. So
yeah,
yeah, there's definitely some positives, but also a lot of challenges as well. But
yeah, for
again,
sure.
very different to things I've done before.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think there's just so many things that you're not aware of really before you start out, right? Like once you say that, it's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But I guess a lot of it, like you kind of need to experience, or you listen to a podcast like this and then you just kind of get those learnings from someone else. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about like the fact that having your own business and the way that the business is run and the way that your business is operating has on your, like, the effects that it has on your personal life. Because one thing that I also want to mention is that you've been part, like, we haven't we have been colleagues in the past, but I also started at some point my own coaching training and then my coaching business, and you have been like one of my first clients, right? So we have also been doing some coaching around how to focus your energy and all these things in your business, and so I obviously know a lot around how this has affected you, right? And I remember once having a coaching session with you on a Monday, and you were like, you know what, I'm just so drained because I had the business on my mind all weekend because these events run on the weekends. Or there have been, I mean, you can talk about your health situation also. There has been a lot around that. So can you tell us a little bit more how this business has been fitting into your personal life, what effects it had, and like what you learned along the way, and maybe what changes you had to make also at some point?
Yeah, I think it is worth probably doing a little bit of context with regards to health, because I think that fits in with this piece as a whole, to be honest. So a couple of years ago, well, I think it's nearly 3 years ago now, actually. So whilst I was still at Cargo One, I got COVID. I didn't really think anything of it, to be honest. Fit, healthy 22-year-old, don't really care about anything in the world, kind of brushed it aside. But a few weeks later, I started to develop symptoms of long COVID. So it was really, really a bizarre experience. I developed this horrific fatigue. I just couldn't get out of bed. Severe paranoia, palpitations. I had a heart rate of 140 BPM just permanently for about 6 months. And yeah, that was a super difficult time. I couldn't work. I couldn't really do anything. This severe brain fog. It felt like I was just constantly flu-like, constantly hungover. I really couldn't do anything. And it was a super difficult time for me. Now that did improve, but even today, it's still an ongoing issue. It's also something I'm super passionate about. So I talk about this a lot. I do quite a lot of advocacy work. I'm also hoping to actually utilize my knowledge of VC to hopefully encourage further funding into long COVID, because it's a huge problem. We've got in the UK alone over 2 million people who suffer. The impact on the economy of that is huge, and there is good work going on, but we just need more funding to make sure that we can develop treatments. And there's a thing called venture philanthropy that we're actually looking at the moment, which is a model where we invest like a traditional VC, but then you utilize the royalties you gain on patents and IP rights from your research projects to reinvest back in. And that's something that I'm really excited about as well, because Cystic Fibrosis Foundation actually did a very similar thing starting back in 1998. They started off with a 40 million worth of grant, and eventually sold those royalties for 3 billion in 2014. So it takes charitable and philanthropy to a whole nother level, using business to really drive research and change forward. So yeah, it's a little side note anyway. on
Though, if some investors were to watch this or listen to this, how should they reach out? What are you looking
Yeah,
for?
drop me a message on LinkedIn for sure. I
Perfect.
always speak to anyone in the health space around this, because it's a huge passion project of mine, and also a huge opportunity, right? As well, like the addressable market isn't going anywhere. It's only getting bigger. Yeah, a huge opportunity that people need to be aware of. But yeah, so that's been something that has affected me. I mean, even to today, I'm significantly better. I'm blessed to be in the position I'm in, where I can live a normal life. I can run a business. I can exercise largely and feel okay. But again, it's still I still struggle with my cognition. I still struggle to think and see clearly, and with the fatigue and everything as well. So my work has to fit around that. It's forced to, and I have to craft my day and shape my day so that it fits around it fits around that as well. So going back to a question about like how that has fitted in with running an events business, it's definitely been challenging. And when we spoke initially back in probably 6 months ago, or maybe even longer now, that was a real challenge because when I first set things up, I was working a job. I was setting things up, working on this part time in the evenings, and then I was running the events myself at the weekends. And obviously, as I went along, I went on the project full time. I hired a team to arrange and run the events. We had a team on the day who would run the events as well. But it took me a while to get processes in place where we could offload a lot of this work to and responsibility to our teams at the events as well. Because I think you instinctively, when you're running something, it's your little baby, and you want to be involved at every single possible point. On the weekend, you've got an issue, get in touch with me. But having that level of not distributing responsibility well massively impacts your growth and also impacts yourself as well, because you're going to burn out because you can't be taking responsibility for every aspect of the business. So yeah, it definitely was a bit of a challenge, especially
Is
early
there,
on.
is there something that you give as advice, maybe? Because I think that that's something that probably every founder can relate to, right? Like what you said, it's your baby, you're most involved, you have an idea of like, this is how it should go. Excuse me. Um, and I think there's also this notion of like, if you hand things over, you always think that you'll be the one who does it better, right? And so you want to interfere and you kind of want people to ask you, but at the same time, you're not getting anything done because everything is still in your head, right? You have never actually handed anything over if you're still involved with this mentally. So is there like any tips that you'd give or any learnings that you had around this?
So I think as a founder, you think that your biggest advantage is your ability to work hard, right? But everybody works hard. Your biggest advantage as a founder is leverage. So the best thing that you can possibly do is to get people in and hire people who are objectively better than you and allow them to do their job and get out their way so that you can distribute. Because if you try and take hold of everything, not only do you burn yourself out, but you do a worse job on it. You don't have the time to focus on things that really matter and those high leverage activities. Um, and it isn't positive for the business. So I would say the biggest piece of advice would be to hire people and distribute tasks to people who objectively can do that better and get out their way and let things grow. I
And
think
I think it's also like because you probably have a passion for everything, but it doesn't mean that you're the best at everything, right? So you're the one who can get things off the ground and then you hand it over to the expert, kind of, right? Like, and I remember one thing also I learned at Cargo One was that they had this notion of you hire people that you would want to work for. So you
yeah,
hire someone that you say, I would want this to be my boss in this department because I can learn from this person, right? So it's not this like, okay, I know best about everything, but
yeah.
I can hand it over to people that I know it's actually in better hands than it was with me.
Yeah, for sure. Because you can't do everything perfectly. You're not an expert in everything, and that's not your job as a founder. Your job as a founder is to um, your as a founder, your role is to be making a lower level of higher impact decisions, right? You're like doing all the customer support, doing everything like this. Yes, you need an understanding of and an experience of how the customer support process works, how the sales process work, how the operations work. But once you have that understanding, what you need to do is make a higher level decision about how that's going to improve and then bring in people who can help execute that in a better way, and give them the freedom and autonomy to improve and manage those processes.
Yeah, definitely. I also want to ask you around because we obviously talked about growth and we talked about like what is a structure that you have that is set up for scaling, and then at the same time we talk about your health, for example, and like how can you make your business work around um, what makes sense for you and like what you need to prioritize, right? And as far as I know, you've had some learnings also around running a business and maybe a bit more of a lean way. So if you want to share maybe around that.
Yeah, so it's been a definitely a steep learning curve, and something that I think has come as a result of my background in history, right? So the last year and a half we've been focused on growing the business, and we did a great job, right? We started at a very small scale company. We were just doing a couple of like one session a week or so. We've scaled that up gradually. We've moved into different locations, and we scaled it from nothing up to 80K monthly revenue. So we did a great job. We built up the team. I built up to 5 full-time people, a whole host of part-time staff as well who run our sessions and execute them as well. And doing that, we definitely made some good progress. But I mentioned in the past that it's with events, it is difficult to scale, and also it's a very different thing to scale an events business versus a high growth startup, right? Because as a startup, you have funding, you don't necessarily care about your profit at the beginning. You want to take up and gobble up market share, and you want to get as much revenue and grow as quickly as possible. You don't care about profit in those early days. However, with a self-funded events business, things are slightly different. Like, you do care about profit, and where you're not relying on monthly, recurring revenue, you're relying on the profit you're making each month that you can then reinvest to expand a different location and so on. So I think, coming from my background of venture capital and working in high growth startups, I've always had it in my head of this, what success in a company looks like, and that is growth. So it's more revenue, more employees, more locations, whatever it may be. And that has been my measure of success as I have gone along. And so when I was seeing the revenue growing, I was seeing the number of employees growing, I was seeing the number of locations expanding, the interest, the views, impressions, everything growing. It felt really good. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. But what I had realized, and as I was going along, was, as a result of this, my business was becoming a lot less lean. So we were, and in a whole range of, not just profit wise, but in terms of ability and easiness to run as well. So as we're scaling it, as we're adding the number of people, as we're now adding locations, and we're focused so much on growth, I realized that our profit margins are just dropping. And I was reaching a point where I was like, okay, our revenue is double or triple what we had been doing a few months back, but I'm actually taking home less money. And also my level of stress is about 2, 3, 4 times the amount, because I've got so much going on. So yeah, that alongside with my health as well, it reached a very difficult point where I was just struggling. I was really struggling to stay motivated. I just felt completely overwhelmed, and I kind of needed that kick up the arse, really, to be like, okay, look, you're not making the money anymore, to really give me that motivation to make a change. And following that made me lean out the business. Our revenue obviously dropped massively, but in the long run, we're actually taking home more money, which is what matters, right? And I think part of it almost is, if I'm being honest, is almost maybe an ego thing. I think it felt quite good to be like, I've got like 5 employees and 20 part-time employees, and I think that maybe felt quite good to say that. But I didn't mention the fact that I was actually making less money than when I now have like just 2 of us.
I
And
mean,
I think it's a big thing that, yeah, even though it seems like very simple, it's very easy to get swept up on that. So yeah, with these sorts of businesses especially, profit is first, and then you can scale. And that's what we're going well, that's what we're doing now. We've got things back lean again, and now we're working to scale in a different way where we keep things very lean. We never overstretch ourselves, and we build things from there.
yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think that also, I mean, the venture-backed startups can still learn so much from that, right? So maybe just to clarify, if also people listening to that are not sure, like, why would you go to venture capital or why not, right? Like, I mean, the idea of venture capital in general is that it's like a tech product, or maybe, focus in a way that you'll need a lot of time to develop it first. And so you won't be making profits straight from the beginning. And so you kind of need to pay these people, but at the same time, you're really looking at that exponential hopefully growth in the future, because once the whole product is built, you can actually scale in the way that you were mentioning before, right? And so that's why it makes sense for investors to go in and say, like, look, I'm going to give you money for the beginning where you don't have your income, but then I'm expecting that at some point your income will just blow up massively. And that's why, for example, with the events business and everything that you mentioned before, it wouldn't make sense to have that as a venture backed business. Maybe if there are components, yes, but like in general, that would be the difference. But at the same time, I think that VC startups can still learn so much from it, right? Because everything that you've been explaining, like I feel like I've seen this in the startup environment that we came from also, right? Where you get 5 million and you hire, or I don't know how much, you get more. You hire a bunch of people and you're like, wow, this is so great. We got this much money and we're hiring this many people. But then you have all this overhead and then you need to coordinate. And then you're like, oh my God, do these people actually know what they're doing? And how can we work together? And then you have other issues in terms of like management, right? And then at the end of the day, you're also not sure where you're making money, because also maybe you didn't have to do that from the beginning, right? So you mentioned that you had to think about that from the first month, where many startups that get VC money don't have to. And I think that there's like pros and cons to that, but I think it's just an interesting learning to have. And it's like good to think about these things also and be more aware and more conscious and not let your ego work against you in that moment, right?
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. Like, I do really think that, yeah, the ego thing is a massive thing. I think there's especially in VC, I think there is this big sort of dick swinging contest. If I've raised this much, I've got this many employees, and then you sometimes lose sight of like what's actually important. And like I said, it is obviously different when you have like, you know, certain companies where you're trying to get as much market share as quickly as possible and stuff. But yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest insights for me is learning about like, yeah, learning it the hard way about like how what I want from the business, right? And not just in terms of maximizing the profit to stress ratio, but also the life that I want to be living whilst running it as well. I think that's quite an important point. Because especially in light of my health, I've gone through years where, you know, I've just been miserable every day because I just I can't function like a normal human thanks to long COVID. And I don't want to be spending. I don't now want to be spending every minute of my day working. I physically can't, and it ruins my quality of life thanks to the illness. So I want to create something that isn't necessarily so I can sell it for 60 million in 6 years. I want to be able to live a good quality of life right now. And that's something that definitely has changed for me in the last few years.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a realization, shall we say?
No, and I remember, I mean, we've had conversations about this in the past, right? And I think it's so important to be like, not only, okay, I'm sacrificing all of this now so that I can have a good life later on, but also like, how can my life look good right in this moment? So, what is your goal right now? Like, what would your ideal day look like, or what does your day already look like now?
Yeah, so I think it's worth going back to the conversation that we had a little while back, because I remember a little while back, especially when I was feeling particularly stressed. I had the like multiple employees. We were operating very fine margins. Things were super stressful. I was like, I just can't wait to be done with this. I just, you know, I don't want to be doing this now. I don't want to be spending my days like this. And we had that conversation about, okay, but like we had the conversation about the ideal day, which is a thing that I do quite often. And for those who don't know, it's basically planning out what your ideal week looks like. So you make an empty Google Calendar and you fill in, okay, what would my ideal day look like? And for most people, you know, might think initially, just sipping pina coladas on the beach, but in reality, for the majority of people, that's not actually how it would look. So for me, it looks something like getting up, doing, spending some time reading and drinking a coffee outside. Then I would crack on with a bit of work. I'd then go to the gym. I would come back and probably do a little bit more work. I'd then maybe spend some time learning Italian. I would then go and spend time with friends. And I planned out what my ideal week would actually look like. And it very much does include work, because I am that sort of person. I enjoy working. I enjoy having a direction of where I want to go. And then the idea is to look at your ideal week and why can't you get that right now? What is stopping you from getting that right now? And we had quite an interesting conversation where I'd planned out my ideal week, and I was saying, look, I'd love to just be able to, I'd love to be able to not work past 3. I can really smash out a lot of work in a short period of day, but then my brain fog gets too much, and I really struggle. And you were like, why can't you do that right now? I mean, it's your company, right? Like, it's what you do. I was like, oh, no, but we work till 5, etc. And I was like, well, I can. I could do that if I want to. So after that, I implemented the change, right? That we worked 9 till 3, and we saw a massive increase in productivity and much better work-life balance. It was much better for my health as well. And I think we often get into this thinking of, okay, I can't do this because of XYZ. But when you look and drill deeper into it, there's no reason why you can't, create things and set things up how you want to, right? So I think that was a huge takeaway, and something that I was very, very glad that I implemented.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's the point for me to do this podcast, right? To like be like, hey, you don't have to do things like everyone else is doing them, but think about what makes sense for you, right? And I think that you went through like these different stages of, I want to build my own company, which already
Yeah,
gives you a lot of freedom, right? So this is already a part where you can decide a lot of things. You're less like dependent on, this is what someone else is telling me to do. But at the same time, even as you were running your own company, you obviously applied like certain ideas of how you saw other people do it, and like, this is how it has to be,
yeah,
this is how a company will be run, this is how you're growing something. And then over that process you understood like, okay, but that's not what is working for me, right? So then you figured out what would my ideal
yeah,
workday and my ideal company and the way that we run it look like. And I think it's amazing to have seen also that process. And I mean, yeah, I totally remember doing these exercises with you, and like, I love seeing your realizations, when you'd come into like a session and you're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed and overwhelmed and blah, blah, blah. And I just, want to sell my company tomorrow just so that I can have, like some quiet
yeah,
time. And then you're like, oh, actually, I do enjoy working. I just don't want to do it all day. So
yeah.
yeah.
I think there's this thing that is, we live in this world, right, where, especially with, you see on TikTok and social media, this escape the 9 to 5, escape the matrix rhetoric. And as an entrepreneur, I completely do buy into that, right? Like, I do believe that, certainly for me, I enjoy the fact that of building something. I love creating things. I love building things. I love being able to shape my life and design it how I like. But I think a lot of people need to be careful with the fact that you don't want to escape your job only to then build yourself another more stressful 9 to 5, or 9 to 7, or 9 to 9. You don't want to. You need to be very careful to not do that. And I think that's something I learned as I was going along. And I think also, especially in light of my health struggles, that's something that has changed. I don't know how my condition will progress. I don't know how things will go. I don't know how I'm going to feel in a month, or 2 months, or a year. So I really want to maximize my enjoyment of life whilst I can. And whereas a few years ago, if you asked me what I was going to do, it was always going to be, I will raise VC money and I will aim to set up a unicorn and a company that will exit for however many million in 6, 7, 8, 9 years' time. That was always the plan. That was always my idea of what I wanted, because I love building things. I want to be able to, I like grinding. I like getting to it and putting the work in. But where things have changed now is my priorities are a bit different. I don't care so much about exiting for 60 million, 100 million, whatever in the future. Don't get me wrong, I like money. I want to make money as well. But I think for me, it's more important to have something that can provide me with cash flow to live a life that I enjoy right now. And also one where I can live it and work very much on my own terms. because as that exercise showed me, I like to work, I like to do things, even with my health situation. I like to be able to do some work, but I want to be able to craft how I work in a way that I want. And I don't have to answer to anyone. I don't have to answer to investors or things like that. I like the fact that I have a company that I can operate how I want, how I choose, and allows me to live the life that I so desire.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it's exactly that's the whole reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think it's so inspiring, and I think it's not something that you do from one day to another, right? But it's like constantly iterating again what we said, and also just
Yeah,
kind of questioning why you want things, right? Because I
yeah,
think that we have certain goals in our head and we're like, yeah, I want to do this and I want to do this, and then it's like, okay, but what part of me wants that and why, and what would that give me, right? And what is more important? So if we talk about the ego, yes, would it give me the status to be like, hey, I sold this unicorn? Like, yeah, okay, amazing, but how much more important is your health, and do they go together, right? And then also, if you want to reach a large number of people and you want to have an impact, like, that's still something that you can do and that you are already doing, right? So I feel like, and I don't want to downplay your experience having long COVID, because I don't know what that's like, and just from everything that I have seen or that you have told me and that I kind of got when this whole thing happened, is like, it was really not a great experience. But I love how what you've been making out of it, right? And there's also like such an entrepreneurship mindset of like, okay, let's work with what we have.
yeah,
And I feel like you have been leveraging on that experience in such a good way. First of all, building your company in a way that it supports your health and your lifestyle, and just doing things in a very sustainable way. But also, you mentioned before your kind of advocacy and like raising awareness for the whole topic of long COVID. And you also mentioned that you want to raise money for research and all these kind of things. So there's still a way how you can have a huge impact on people, right? But
yeah,
it doesn't have to be building a unicorn. Could
yeah,
be, but it doesn't have to.
yeah. I think and because it's something that has, throughout this whole, even now, I would give every single penny I have for the rest of my life if I could feel 100%. I wouldn't even hesitate. I wouldn't even blink to do that. And having that is so powerful because whenever I'm thinking about things in terms of, oh, well, this doesn't prioritize my health, I'm like, right, well, I'm not. I'm not involved in that because it's so it's I can't even begin to explain like how it's felt. And but it's also, like I said, it's been a blessing because it has helped me to prioritize things, and it has helped me to learn what's important. And it has taken a while because like I still have felt like parts I've just been pushing and trying to prioritize things and not saying no to things when I should have. But now I feel in a much better place where I am building something that supports my life and allows me to live my life right now how I want to live it and how I can live it in light of my health. And then also I have like you said the long COVID work as well that is a more longer term plan to try and help this, and also from a slightly selfish perspective, to be honest, because like I said, I want nothing more than to find a treatment for this, because that would just be the best thing in the world. So yeah, it's definitely been a learning, but it's something I'm grateful for.
No, for sure. And I think, again, something that, having worked in VC, you see that mostly the entrepreneurs with like the biggest drive are the ones that have experienced the problem that they're trying to solve, right? So
Yeah.
that can help. Um, so I think we're kind of coming to the end. I have basically asked all the things that I wanted to ask you, but is there something else that you would like to share from your experience that you feel like this was an absolutely relevant learning for me? This is something that people could take away. I wish I'd known this sooner, or I just want to share this with people now because it could be valuable.
I think for me, like the biggest learning for me is thinking like, is crafting your life to in a way that you can live your life exactly how you want to right now. Now, obviously, building towards something is is really important. I think it's so important you have a goal, you have something you're prioritizing and looking forward to in the future. But I don't believe in this thing where it's like there is obviously a level of sacrifice where, you know, to get to achieve great things, you do need to sacrifice to a degree. But when you get into this mindset of, oh, but I can sell in a year, it'll be fine once I sell, or in a year once I've quit this, I'll be fine, I'll enjoy myself. You then build this sort of false um this false hope on this thing in the future, and I think that's very very dangerous and puts you in a very bad spot. I think that's one of the biggest learnings for me is to create your life right now how you want it to be, and not rely on some future event to feel this fulfillment. Enjoy the process, you know.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you
Yeah,
so
as it
much for
sounds.
sharing. No, and I think honestly, I feel like people can take, like, anyone who's listening to this or watching this, like even if they didn't have long COVID, I feel like can relate, right? Because there
Yeah.
are, like, putting our health first is so important. Managing our energy is so important. Burnout is such a relevant topic because I think unless you're not 100% forced to set your own boundaries and prioritize your own well-being, oftentimes you don't, right? And then you can also see this with people having children, right? So if you're a parent and you're still working, and like there's so many people like trying to tear themselves apart, and like things will always fall short. And I guess just having your priorities and getting to that point where you're like, right, if this is not serving me and my well-being right now, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
um can be very enlightening and very helpful for the long term.
Yeah, I think also it's important to like, because don't get me wrong, a strong work ethic is really, really important to succeed in whatever you're doing. You know, I've learned this. I've been an international judo athlete. I know what it's like to work hard. I know you need to put in the hours, you need to put in the time. But I think as you go along as well, you realize, whether it's in business or whatever, like everybody works hard, right? Like lots of people work hard, and there's only X amount of hours in a day. And working hard doesn't necessarily mean slaving at your laptop from 8 until midnight every day. That doesn't necessarily get you where you want to go. So in light of thinking about your health and your life in general, I've been forced to look at how can I maximize output with the input that I have thanks to my health and energy levels. And the way I've done that is to create higher leverage activities. So whether that be employing somebody, whether it be using tools, whether it be doing you know, larger scale marketing and things like that, that has been something that I've been forced to do to maximize my output based on what I can put in. When you're a healthy individual, young, got lots of energy, you don't necessarily think about that because you can slave away and you can put in 16-hour days. You can put that away. But if you can start thinking more about, okay, how can I maximize the leverage in the activities I'm doing rather than just the straight out output or work that you're putting in, I think that will be massively beneficial for anybody watching, and will massively help their growth curve, and also hopefully allow you a bit more time to put into other things that you enjoy as well.
Yeah, amazing. And I think because it's all about balance, right? Like it doesn't, and I love that you emphasize that, because I think both you and me are like very ambitious and like, driven people who love to work on what they do, but at
Yeah,
the same time just having that balance actually gets you so much further, right? Because like you're not just saying, well, I want to work and then I just want to do other things. Like even doing these other things will benefit you work, right?
mm,
Like if you still have a solid foundation in terms of your social circle and you have good relationships because you were able to make time for that, and if you exercise regularly and you eat healthy and you sleep enough, like that's going to
yeah,
do wonders for your work productivity, right? So it's not even saying like it's either or, it is even going into that. um yeah, amazing. And I feel like I love that you shared your journey and your learnings here. I realize like there's so many more things that we could even talk about. Like you just mentioned judo, which I know is such an important thing for you. I didn't even mention in the beginning, like you studied physics, right? So there's a whole thing of like, how did you come? We're talking about building a business, and I know that you started out studying physics, and I think it's just so amazing to see how your life is not set in stone, and it's not just like, okay, now you do this thing and you chose it and now you do this for the rest of your life and that's it. But
Yeah.
how all these little parts come together, and how all these components and like experiences that you have shape who you are and what you do and how you can do it. And we talk about like how you could draw so much from your experience, for example, at Cargo One, and how you can then apply that to an events business, and how you can then use your experience with long COVID to then again help other people, and all these kind of things. Like, I think it's so cool to see, and I hope that it inspires others also to not just think like, oh my god, I have to make one choice, and then this is the one activity that I do, and then this
Yeah.
is who I am as a person, and that's going to be forever, right? Like, there's so much development, and there are so many things that you didn't even see coming, but it just kind of flows, and it helps you like live your purpose and do what you love.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. And I think it's been like, I think a lot of the conversations and a lot of the work that we've done has been very valuable, just in terms of pulling out the answers out of my head. Right, I think often we've sat down and I've been like, just bombardment of, oh well, what is going on? Why is this not? Why is it? Why am I doing this? Why is this all happening? And I think where you've been really great is like not telling me, but asking the right questions, asking me a question about, okay, well, why can't you just do that? And I'm like, that's a good point. Whereas in my head, I just assumed, well, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I work a 9 to 5. And you just asking those right questions, I think, has been, yeah, super, super invaluable. So, yeah, I want to thank you as well, because it's been
No, of course. I mean,
massive part of it.
love the whole coaching experience with you, because I think it's like, it's so cool to like support people who are so passionate about what they're doing. And yeah, I guess it's all around like challenging these assumptions, right? Just like, you believe that to be true, but who said that that's true? Who said that that's the
Yeah.
only way? Amazing. Thank you so much, Harry. I really, really enjoyed having this conversation. So first of all, these are topics that I think both you and me are kind of passionate about. I love learning from you always. I love hearing your story, and I love to be able to share that with other people, because there were honestly so many things in this conversation that you said, and I felt like, wow, I'm so happy to put this out there, because I think so many people will go through this experience and will think like, oh, this is how I have to do things, and then maybe this doesn't feel great for me, but I guess there's no other way. And just realizing like there is, and people go through that experience, and you can set things up in a way that benefits you. Like, I think that's so nice to be
Yeah,
able to show.
for sure. No, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed sharing, and yeah, I've very much enjoyed working with you as well. It's been super good. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Amazing. I'll stop the recording here. Thank you so much. And I'll speak with you soon.